Hello, Bible readers. It is Tuesday, June 22nd. We're reading from Nehemiah chapters 5 to 7, and I'll actually say more about chapters 1 through 4 as well, because yesterday I didn't really get into chapters 1 to 4. I just kind of did the overview. So I'll talk about chapters 1 through 7, and then 2 Timothy, we finish it up. One more book down, getting closer. Okay, so Nehemiah chapter 1. I wanted to return to that especially because it's a prayer that gets at Nehemiah's theology as well as any part of his memoir. His name means, Nehemiah means, Yahweh has given comfort, which echoes that promise from 2nd Isaiah that calls on God to give comfort, oh my people. But at the beginning of Nehemiah, God has not given comfort yet. So Nehemiah's prayer calls on God to keep God's promises. And that tells us something about Nehemiah's theology, his understanding of who God is, that God would keep God's promises. Nehemiah understands God to be the God of heaven, awesome and terrible, kind of in that distant, majestic way, but also Nehemiah understands God to be one who keeps covenant and who shares steadfast love and mercy, and is willing to restore the chosen people from exile, as God did when they were in Egypt. In other words, Nehemiah believes God's forgiveness is always greater than God's wrath, which is that's a big theological truth for us to recognize as far as what Nehemiah is saying in this prayer and what he's up to through this whole project of rebuilding the wall. After chapter 1's prayer, Nehemiah gets permission from Artaxerxes to build. We read names of people who led the efforts to build the wall. We read of Nehemiah's response to threats against the building of the wall, which of course is interesting because we know the wall was going to face perhaps external threats. That's the whole point of a wall. But it's the internal threats that become a big problem in these chapters of Nehemiah. Who knew that the internal threats would be the primary threats that Nehemiah would have to deal with as he tries to build? There's a sermon in there that the internal is a greater threat even than the external. Anyway, in today's chapters 5 to 7, we read of Nehemiah's personal generosity and how the wall gets done despite repeated attempts to intimidate Nehemiah. Once the wall is complete, it needs to be staffed. It needs to be operated by the right, loyal kind of people, which is no simple task. So that's where our reading finishes today. 2 Timothy, as far as how it ends, a final charge is given to Timothy and a couple requests are made as this letter ends in a way that many Pauline letters do. Paul, of course, is held up as the example to follow for Timothy. Quite a self-reflection of Paul is offered here. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness. Would someone say that of their own self? I mean, maybe, but it feels pretty boastful, doesn't it? I've only been faithful. The race is complete. The interesting part here for me is that we not only get a view into the kinds of exhortations given to early church leaders, be a good preacher, be kind to everyone, all that kind of stuff, we also get a small sense of who the church consists of. Timothy is dealing with actual people, with actual names, actual communities, Prisca, Aquila, households in various towns, people who needed to be greeted and known. The end of this letter really kind of pulls me back from thinking about how theoretical being early church leaders must have been. There was practical stuff here, Betty and Bertha stuff here, that you got to tend to the sheep. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.